using basic shape layers and manipulating sort of movement with keyframes, now you can actually dive a lot deeper into this and kind of start going crazy. So for example, if I wanted to, sometimes since this is so messy, I will turn off all of the all the eyeballs on things so that I'm only kind of looking at a couple of things at a time. So if this line here, and again, I would probably control click on that or right click on it and go to rename, and I would call that like like line 3, whatever line it was. Make sure that I can figure it out, spell it right. So go there. So now I know what I'm working with, and I can keep adjusting that. I can grab the black arrow tool and kind of reposition it. Oops, that was just grabbing a thing, a little part of it. Okay. So now if I want, I can actually go crazy with transforming and changing the properties of this particular item that I've made. So it's a series of vector-based Bezier curves and just points that I've added to that item. So again, if I twirl down and I go deep enough in, I can always find options for transforming things, right? And so there's a whole bunch of things that I could kind of like try to begin with. But I think what I'll do first is I'll go to the stroke color, right? And so if I move forward a little bit, just a few seconds in, I'll zoom in a little bit more so we can see each second by itself. Okay, so I go forward a second or so, and I put a keyframe there. So I'm going to drop a keyframe with the stopwatch on the color, and then I go forward another second, and I change that color to something different. The computer is now going to transform my line's color from red to blue, right? And I can keep going. I can add more colors in there if I want to. So I can keep going down the line and pick out some really like kind of crazy nutty things, and the computer's just gonna like try to interpret those changes as I see fit. So I can change the timings of all that, of course, by just moving my keyframes around and make them tighter together for it to go faster, or I can like spread them out to make it go slower, right? So I can change time, I can change opacity, I can like mess with that. I can actually even change the stroke width. So let's say I go here and I drop a keyframe there, and then I go forward a little bit more in between, and I crank the width of that down a lot, and then I go forward even more and I crank it way up. Okay, so now my line will not just change colors, it's going to get skinnier and fatter, right? So you can change the elemental like kind of principles of that item just by changing that stuff around. I could change opacity, like I said. You can actually change like some of these things, like you can have a round end on it. You can change the kind of the way that the joins work or the bevels join. So there's just a ton of like things you can do. You can add dashes to your line. So if you click here, you can put some dashes in the line. It probably won't be able to see it because I've got the stroke width so high, but yeah, it's pretty small. There, you can barely see it now, but you can change all of these components, right? So there's just a million like things that you can do. You can taper it. So you can keyframe all of those options, like you keyframe this taper, the starting and stop of the whole thing. You can make it wave and jitter. You can do all these kinds of things. You can make it phase, right? So you can like crank it up, and it would probably phase if I had some other things unchecked. So all of that stuff is like stuff that you can just totally start playing around with, right? So you see how far down into this rabbit hole you can dive, right? This is a nice little effect where it shows you the colors that you're choosing to like change, right? So that is pretty nice. And sometimes that's a good way to keep track of things that might get confusing, right? So I just added another color, so now it's going to go from these tones into that one. And then the other thing I wanted to show you would be, so we know how to move this across the screen, right? So I could go to transform, and I could go to position, and I could move the whole layer. Just I could make it scoot across the screen if I wanted to, which might be a thing you want to do. But you can also do more complicated things by transforming the properties of these anchor points themselves. So again, this gets a little bit kind of crazy, but if I click in here, because what I've done is I've made a path from this point to these points all the way around, and then I've told it to put a certain stroke on it and not to have a fill and to transform it, right? So I can actually go here to path and click that button and add a keyframe, and if I go forward a little ways and then I just sort of select one of those points, one of those vector points, and change it, it's going to transform it from that spot to the next spot. So there you go. So then I can move this one if I want to select that one and grab it and sort of transform that one around like this. And now, you know, it's gone that direction, right? And so, you know, there's no end to the amount of transformations that you can make to an item just by like kind of changing around the different principles and properties of the whole thing. You know, I can do that with a line. I can also go into like a shape. So for example, I've got my star, right, that's moving across the screen, and I can actually go into this rectangle and I can keep twirling down into that to the rectangle path. And let's see, I think it's this. Sometimes I get confused about what I'm looking for in here, right? So yeah, I can change the stroke there. I can do, let's see, the position of it. Okay, so I just dropped a keyframe there. If I move this forward now and just grab one of those things, it will it'll let me kind of change that around too, so it'll transform itself between the two things. So again, there are lots and lots of options you can use. The easiest way, like probably to make a square that I would be able to like transform, would be to go up here, clear everything out, make a new, you can always make a new shape layer just to keep things straight, put it up at the top, and then I would go to my pen tool and I would just make a new square. So the way to do that would be to click and then hold down the shift key, and that'll make a straight square line. Hold down another shift key, the other one, and then this one. And if I don't want a stroke applied at all, I can turn the stroke off and then come over here to the fill and you do a solid color. Click OK. And then now I can easily transform this whole thing because I've got those easy to transform points, right? So I can click on the shape, I can click on my path, and just hit the button here that's that, and move forward a little bit, grab my black arrow tool, start stretching that whole thing out, and now it's going to do something totally different, right? Like so. As it hits those 2 points, it's going to transform itself into the other thing. So that is basically the gist of like how to do all of the different kinds of effects that you might see. You can change color, you can change opacity, you can move things across the screen. All of those things can happen at once. You just have to keep track of them down here in this layers palette. So it gets really complicated. The best way to learn it is to try and see what you come up with as you go through all the steps.